there are a lot of people who say that using peat moss is not good for the environment. And I think by and large, that may be true, okay? But as with everything in life, there's a little bit of nuance to this, all right? So let's walk through this a little bit. The reason that some people say using peat moss is not environmentally friendly is because peat bogs, which is where peat moss comes from, are a huge sequester of carbon. And the reason that they are a sequester of carbon is that a peat bog is so saturated with water that trees and other vegetation and even animals or even human bodies that are found in a peat bog, they don't decompose. Okay, so when a tree or other organic material decomposes, it releases CO2. And the idea is that because the peat bog is keeping things so saturated that they don't decompose, it's sequestering CO2 because the vegetation that's trapped in the peat bog never breaks down and never releases CO2 in the decomposition process. Okay, fine. But we're doing worm farming. And so that changes things a little bit because there's a give and a take to everything in this world. And with worms, okay, if you're using your peat moss to put your worms in, and then you're feeding your worms food scraps, well, I would argue that's a net positive for the environment, all right? When we use food scraps to feed worms, we are doing the environment an enormous favor, because when we throw food scraps into a landfill, they go anaerobic and they produce methane gas. And methane is like 10 times as worse as CO2 is for the environment. It's a greenhouse gas, but methane is also poison, all right? So every time you throw food scraps into your garbage can and it goes to a landfill and it gets trapped and it goes anaerobic, it produces methane, all right? When we put our food scraps in a worm bin, the worms help decompose the food scraps. We don't get methane, we get carbon dioxide. And you can say what you want about whether carbon dioxide is a good thing or a bad thing, and there's different opinions on that. But one thing that is for sure is that carbon dioxide is a hell of a lot better for the world than methane, all right? So if you're using your peat moss to help break down food scraps in an aerobic, organic way, I would argue that the damage you're doing to the environment by harvesting the peat bog is offset by the good you're doing to the environment by not putting your food scraps in a landfill. So, you have to look at all these environmental issues with a little bit of nuance. There's always a cost and there's always a benefit to pretty much everything you do in this world. And this blanket statement that harvesting peat bogs is terrible for the world, well, that's an oversimplification, okay? Because if you're harvesting peat bogs to make worm bins, you're probably doing the world a favor, okay?